I would entertain three separate motions. We'll start first with the growth policy amendment to the future land use designation. Let's start there.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve Whitefish Growth Policy Amendment 2420, is it? And the original finding of fact as they were recommended initially by the staff.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Further discussion?
Yes, I'd like to talk to this. First of all,
Let's keep it specific to the growth policy.
Okay. So to the growth policy, I checked that it's been amended when we felt that it was obsoleted. Case in point, the snow lot, parking lot. The process of the Community Development Board that I normally respect and support. This time it was a 4-2-2, and I call it a mistrial because of how it came to be. I think leaving that area as it is, it's riskier and more potentially damaging to the community with the industrial zone or the non-zoning, non-definition that we're trying to do tonight than to move and homogenize that area within the growth policy to the surrounding areas. That's the reason for which I'm in favor.
Thank you. Further discussion? Frank?
I remind this council that when we agreed to annex this property, we made no promises to the developer as to what zoning we were going to put on it or what growth policy we might consider. I think it's important for us to consider whether or not, under these circumstances, given this proposal, whether we want to adopt a zone change or a growth policy change that will not give us what we need for this community, which includes some affordable housing. Remember, we have control over whether or not we want to make a growth policy change at this particular hour. I keep in mind, all of us, that we are also in the middle of a re-examination of our growth policy. And that's going to take place over the next year or so. And I'm not sure that this kind of development will be part of that growth policy. I don't know, it might be. But I suggest to you that the point of this is that we have the right to control whether or not we grant a growth policy amendment for this particular development, which does not provide us or does not provide this community with any opportunity for any affordable percentage of these homes. And so I point that out to us so that we clearly understand where we're going with this, because at this point we have control. If we approve this growth policy amendment now, given this development, to allow this development, we've lost control of our ability to include, suggest, incent some affordable housing. So I offer that to you, and I will not support that.
I have a point of order. This is not a development. This is not a PUD. This is a subdivision. It's a plat, and so.
I understand.
Let's keep our discussion to the growth policy amendment, please. Ben?
Modifying the growth policy is not something I take lightly. I mean, I'm very aware of the fact that there's been a lot of thought put into that growth policy over the years. And as a general rule, it's something I do defer to quite a bit. With that said, I also think the growth policy is fairly old. And, you know, I apply my own experience in our community when evaluating an application like this and how it fits in to our growth policy. And to be honest, I don't really know what the value to our community is of having this as industrial land. I don't see that that is going to be something that is complementary to the neighbors, to the community in general, and you know, it's just not, doesn't seem to be where Whitefish is going as a general matter. And so I don't it just seems like something that is ripe for change, and it wouldn't surprise me if it changes in this next growth policy cycle. I know this council has in the past done growth policy amendments in certain circumstances. I'm looking at this and I'm saying this is clearly a very nice property in an environmental sense. Adding a bunch of industrial uses on there does not seem like it helps anything. And so as for this growth policy amendment, I will support it.
Steve?
Yeah, just to add on to that, well, I agree that when I look at a growth policy amendment, I have to look and see what is the old growth policy, what does the growth policy currently say, and what's on the ground there. And I do think that the intent here, changing this growth policy to an urban residential setting makes sense because that's what it's next to. In reading through the history from Mr. Coram, it was quite telling about why it even ended up industrial anyway, because we used to have a gravel pit right next to it, and there was thought that this could be another gravel pit. The dump was there, close by, and there was actually a connection from Caro through Lund Lane over to this property. So I found that quite telling in reading that narrative, and that obviously has changed. We don't want a gravel pit in town. We don't want industrial uses in town. And what we want is residential property. We want urban residential property that's close to our amenities, and that's exactly what this is. So I do support the growth policy amendment in this case.
Thank you, Steve. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry on a 3-1 vote with Councilor Sweeney voting in opposition. I would then entertain a motion to rezone from County R3, which is one family residential, and I2, heavy industrial, to our WR1, which is our one family residential district, and WR2, our two family residential district to facilitate residential development.
So moved.
Steve, is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Giuseppe.
Yes.
Would you like to speak to your motion, Steve?
Yeah, I think it's clear we don't need industrial uses in that area, and I think R1 on the left half butts up nicely with the R3 county designation further to the west, and then R2, which is closer and more and accommodates what's going on in the surrounding areas, makes sense.
Thank you, Steve. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry on a 3-1 vote with Councilor Sweeney voting in opposition, which brings us on to our final required motion, which would be the request for a preliminary plat to develop 34.06 acres located at Flathead Avenue, zoned R3 and County I2, which we just rezoned. 73 lots and 14 townhomes, 59 single-family homes, in response to recommended conditions of approval for the extension of West 18th Street. Giuseppe.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve, and I lost track, WPP 24 dash, help me, what?
2.
Two, and for the record, the original findings of fact as recommended by the Whitefish City staff as described.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. If now would be the time to make an amendment, if you'd like, yes.
Well, I was wanted to offer you the opportunity for the amendment that you wanted to make about the setback and the buffering.
Yeah,
Buffer averaging.
yep, absolutely.
I don't know what you wanted, but I wanted.
I can't make a motion, so.
Oh, okay. Well, if you,
But I would
you
suggest
could
that-
remind me of the friendly amendment that you wanted to make. I didn't quite totally understand it, but
That
I
there,
didn't think
there's,
it was a bad idea.
to the effect of where wetland buffers exist on the platted lots, that those areas comply with the water quality ordinance, I think is what I was looking for. Just some assurance that the building envelopes are going to be outside of those buffers.
Okay, so I would ask for a friendly amendment to make sure that the building envelopes are outside of the buffer, where they're encroaching on the buffer to average it out, that there are still no building envelopes within that buffer zone.
Is there a second to the
I'll
friendly amendments?
second that.
What number would that be, Wendy, if you could help me? 21? So that'd be friendly amendment 21.
Condition number 21.
Condition, any comments on the condition? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does pass unanimously, adding condition number 21 regarding wetland setbacks. Further discussion from the council. Giuseppe?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to address a couple of the concerns here. First of all, I would walk that property, but it's not my property. That's a private property, and the rules are in place, and we just change some of them accordingly to what the whole city is doing. Affordability, let's talk about affordability. A developer has to go through putting money aside, buy the land, hiring engineers, go to the staff and work with the staff, and then subject themselves to a public hearing with the Community Development Board, where I invite you all to come and watch. It's very educational. Then they come to City Council, and still City Council can rule differently from where the expectations could have been. And I agree with Frank, no promises were made and no promises are being delivered. Then sometimes they have to hire an arborist. And finally, maybe they get an approval. These are all levels and layers that reduce affordability because they increase cost in the project. Now, let's talk about density. We cannot have it both ways. If we want more houses, we need to accept higher density. I grew up in a place where there were no parking lots reserved for owners of properties. So for all these reasons, and for believing that between the safeguards we're putting in place, the rules that we have legislated upon in the past, and the willingness of this local developer, I'm very honored to vote in favor of this motion. And finally, Kerry, I'm not your watchdog, I'm your servant.
Steve?
I'll make it quick. I'm not unsympathetic to the people who want more housing. I want it to be denser. At the same time, WR4 does not fit here. We can't just willy-nilly, especially when we change the growth policy. We have to keep an eye on what's in the neighboring area, and there's no WR4 in the neighboring area. So WR2 makes the most sense, and they're only doing duplex lots on a very small portion of this even. Closer to the industrial uses of the shop, which makes sense, totally makes sense. We also have to be very careful about what we can require, and with a preliminary plat, we can't require anything. We tried, city tried, state said no, you can't require affordable housing, and that's unfortunate for all of us. When we have an opportunity to approve 73 single-family homes, I'm skeptical, but I'm going to put my faith in a guy like Doug Sidarius and Mr. Schellinger way more than I'm going to put it into an outside development company that comes in from the outside and wants to build something here. Especially reading, I hope all of you get a chance to read this letter from Mr. Quorum, because it's quite telling. Parkland, Richard, you know as well as we do that we always accept parkland, whatever it is, even if it's, sometimes we even accept it if it's the drainage area, if it's the stormwater area. If it's not developed, it's considered parkland for the most part. This is a generous offer, and it fits right in with what this family wants on this property. So I am going to vote for this, obviously, and the last thing I want to address is light pollution. We have a dark sky ordinance. This will have to be dark sky compliant. I think a lot of the light pollution in Whitefish, because I see it all the time too, from my house comes from the roundhouse, unfortunately. It's BNSF. It's not development in town for the most part. That's not 100% true, but a lot of that light pollution is from the roundhouse. And all right, I'm rambling now. Thanks, Kerry. You brought the rambling out in me. So I will support this, obviously.
Further discussion on the motion with added condition number 21. Ben?
I would make a brief comment on affordable housing, a topic which is near and dear to my heart. I hear a lot of the comments about the lack of affordable housing in this project, and I get it. I mean, it's something obviously I wish we would see more of here and more of in most developments. But it's a policy argument. It's an argument that has a lot of merit, but it has to be applied in a much broader way. And, you know, if we have, if that's something we believe, which I believe, then we need to change the rules so that that affordable housing requirement is something that applies to everything, not just one-off to a project that comes in here. If we think that there should be deed-restricted affordable housing, we should try to find a way to do that. I know there's roadblocks to the state. If we don't think it's dense enough, then we should look at our own zoning regulations. But I just think trying to apply this in a piecemeal way onto a project like this is very problematic. And additionally, I would say to take an otherwise non-objectionable, mostly non-objectionable housing development and straight up turn it down to build node housing is probably not going in the right direction we want to go either. So I think the comments are well taken. I think we should think about it. I think we should consider, you know, what the role of additional annexations and development is in our town and how we can continue to evolve the guardrails to get what we want out of it. But I don't think that turning this project down in that way is something we can even really do right now. So I will be supporting the project, and I hope it turns out well for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry on a 3-1 vote with Councilor Sweeney voting in opposition. Thanks everyone for